Recently, I've set myself a somewhat ambitious, maybe even greedy goal. That goal is to keep 100% chance to suppress spell damage while wearing as little evasion gear as humanly possible, which is a lot more complicated than it sounds when you're super greedy and picky like I am and want all of your items to be the best, on top of also having spell suppression, on top of being on armor bases rather than evasion bases. I started with evasion boots, helmet, chest, and gloves. The goal here being, well, it's really easy to get suppression on evasion bases. And so early on, I used Recombinators to make myself some really awesome stuff. And since then, my gear has continued to grow and evolve. The things that were tier 2 now needed to be tier 1. So I have tier 1 spell suppression gloves, which is not exactly ideal because they're on an evasion base. And these I'm probably just going to be keeping. Now my chest piece is also a little bit tricky, since I want to ashling it and get 35% chance to avoid elemental ailments. So my option is give up on the dream of Guadalitsi plus ashling, and just recombinate together some armor bases with avoid, and some evasion bases with suppression, or be greedy and keep failing the crafts, because that's what I've been doing, and it's not really stopping me. For my boots, I already have an armor base. Not only that, it's a fractured base. I have 30% move speed and chance to suppress spell damage, along with perfect implicit's chance to avoid. It's just great. My boots are done. I could use Harvest Reforged Life to get better life as a prefix. That's one of the really nice things you can easily do with a fractured base, since you're not risking the move speed. But aside of doing that, I'm perfectly happy if they don't change at all. My helmet, however, was one of my earliest crafts, before I really understood Recombinators, back when I thought that you kind of needed to use fractured bases to have a good chance of success. This was literally the first couple days. You could check Pewee Ninja to see exactly which day I made it, as I put it on almost immediately. I now know a lot more about how Recombinators work, and so today I endeavored and succeeded in making myself a new helmet. What I wanted on my helmet was physical taken as elemental, meaning I don't need as much armor to soften the blows from big physical hits. I wanted it to be an armor base, or of a very worst armor evasion, and I wanted it to have spell suppression. Tier 1 would be great, but at least tier 2. So I started buying bases. Now, ideally I wanted bases that had a fairly high item level so that I could roll other good mods on the item, but this wasn't a strict requirement, this was more of just a guideline. There's a note, if you do something like this for yourself, only combine tier 1 spell suppression with item level 85 or higher bases. Otherwise, there's a chance your craft will fail because the item level of a new base will be too low. And so I bought a bunch of helmets with decent spell suppression. I was also looking for things like life and res, just so maybe I had a little bit better shot of the final item being something good. And I bought a lot of armor bases. These armor bases all had to have the Delve mod, physical taken as elemental. This comes in 3 flavors, and you cannot combine them because they're from the same mod group. Physical taken as fire, physical taken as cold, and physical taken as lightning. There is also physical taken as chaos, but until I get a mage blood, my chaos res probably isn't going to be capped. It's capped against dots, but not against hits, so I don't want to be using that. And then I began smashing them together, pretty successfully actually. I ended up with a helmet that's perfect for what I need. It even has a suffix so that I can use the hybrid chaos res and cold res. I was really hoping to have an actual chaos res roll here, but sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. I used about 30 attempts, and I'd say that I had pretty good success, all things considered. I even made a backup helmet, which I'm going to put up for sale for a couple exalts, and if it doesn't sell, then I'll probably annul it and do some other risky stuff, since if no one's going to buy it, might as well. And if you're interested in more crafting, especially with recombination, or maybe how I made more of my gear, then get subscribed, as I'm going to be talking about recombinators a lot in the near future. And if you're enjoying the video, be sure to leave a like, as that's a great way to help me out completely for free. On the other hand, if you do want to provide direct financial support to help me continue to make videos just like this one for people just like you, then you can do so over on my Patreon. But more about that at the end. For now, I wanted to go over a couple of best practices that I used when making these helmets. And I'll probably get into this in another video later, but since that's still unfinished, for now, let's just go with how to do things optimally for this specific craft. First off, you want as many suffixes as possible. You want all the items to have 3 suffixes, since you want your resulting item to have 2 suffixes, and when you recombinate items together, they tend to be more likely to lose affixes than gain affixes. So I was always prioritizing purchases with 3 suffixes, and if I couldn't get that, I'd buy something with 2 suffixes and craft a third. I mean, a crafted mod isn't ideal, but it's certainly better than just losing a suffix that I wanted to keep. For the prefixes, I didn't care at all. In some cases, I'd throw random things like life in there just because if I got a good life roll, cool, but I wasn't too worried about it since I didn't actually care how many prefixes my item had. Of course, if I roll good life, then that's awesome, but if I don't, I can always use suffixes can't be changed, reforge life with harvest, I can use a veiled chaos orb, or I could just use eldritch crafting and not have to worry about it. So for a craft like this, where you're trying to combine 2 suffixes, ideally you want 3 suffixes on both bases, and ideally you want at least one of those 3 suffixes to match. So if you have a base with lightning res, life regen, and phys taken as, you'd want to pair it with a base that has spell suppression, lightning res, and ideally life regen, because mods can't roll twice and you'd never get a double life regen suffix. So there's only 4 options in the pool, but you get a lot of the benefits of the pool having 6 mods. In a lot of cases, I was not doing this, because it was simply too expensive. If I looked for perfect bases, I would have been paying 40 to 50 chaos per attempt, and while this would have increased my odds, instead I was paying 10 to 15 chaos per attempt. So being able to do 3 not quite optimal crafts was often better than doing 1 or 2 fully optimal ones. And sorry, I misspoke a little bit earlier. When I said 40 to 50 C per attempt, I didn't mean total for both bases, I meant for each base. So it was actually more like 80 to 100 C per attempt, whereas a lot of my bases were 10 to 15 C on one side, and then maybe 3 to 5 C on the other, so the cheaper attempts were certainly a lot more efficient in that regard. There were also just a lot more options. So far, I found Recombinators to be really fun. Quite broken, there's certainly things that they should probably not be able to make, and multi-fractured items is probably one of them. But they're also really cool, and I like how they interact and give value to items that otherwise would be just thrown away. I mean, hell, I can't remember the last time where I could just pick up a bunch of item level 85 Imperial Claws, and then sell them to someone for 3 chaos each. Right now, if you want to mass collect bases and put them in something like a quad tab and just put it up for sale for 3-4C each, you'll probably get a lot of sales. It's something that I may very well experiment with, using a custom filter at some point in the future just to see if it feels worth it. Although, of course, worth it to me as someone who can make hundreds of exalts might not be quite the same as worth it to someone who only makes tens of exalts. But I do think tens of exalts is a very achievable goal, and if you want to know more about that, I recently made a video talking about a money-making method that anyone can do, which makes tens of exalts very easily. And so, I hope you found this helpful, and I'm curious, what do you think of the idea of permanently keeping Recombinators in Path of Exile? Are you for it? Do you think they absolutely have to get nerfed? Or maybe you're completely against it because you're a standard player and you just watched all of your mirror tier items instantly become completely worthless overnight. And if so, don't worry, you can always make some awesome stuff while they're still here that no one will be able to replicate if they do get removed. But I'm curious your thoughts, so let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to put them down in the comments below, or join the Discord, where you can ask questions, get build help, and hang out with the community. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. They're awesome, and they get to show it by having their name on screen in the credits of all my videos. So if you want to see your name here, be sure to check the link in the description. For more general gaming content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, and if you want a water bottle or a cool shirt, I have a link to my official merch shop in the description. I hope you learned something today, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.